It's race week, the first of the year, which is the most exciting time for us F1 fans. But I think best of all, YouTubers with zero wheel knowledge expose themselves as frauds in their season prediction. On a totally unrelated note, I'm Varner, you can call me Vans, and these are my F1 2023 season predictions. So today I'll be going through the order I think the drivers will finish from 20th to 1st, and doing likewise for the constructors from 10th to 1st. I'll also throw in some wild predictions at the end just for fun, and hopefully at the end of the season we can all look back and agree that I should never have made this video. Just for information, I am recording this on the first day of pre-season testing, which means I know nothing about the car's performance except for the fact that Aston Martin has already broken down, which probably giving Alonso some PTSD. Starting at the back with P20, I've gone for Logan Sargent. He's a rookie who's just coming to the sport in a car that I think will remain the slowest car. I think they'll progress, but I think they'll be the slowest still. He's not going to beat his teammate, I don't think. Albon is a great driver, and it's his first season. We can't expect much, so he has to go at the back. I don't want to put him there, but he has to go there. And also that's why I put his teammate, Albon, P19, because again, I do think Williams will be the slowest car. I think they'll score points. I think there will be also a catch-up to the front of the grid, but I just don't see them moving off the back, at least this season, perhaps next season. In P18, I've gone for Zhou Guanyu. Now, I think Zhou, at the end of last season, showed that he has potential to reach a very good level in F1. However, I just don't think Alpha are going to be there as they were at the start of last season. At the start of last season, they were sort of maybe 4th, 5th quickest, maybe. But I just don't see them replicating that. And I think, when it comes to a tight battle for the lower end of the points, which I think they'll be in, experience matters. And I think Zhou sort of lacking a bit of experience may impact that and hinder him. I think as well, the Audi deal won't really have an impact till next year with the finances and everything coming in. I mean, the car has a lot of sponsorships on it, which is great, but I think next year will really be the year that we will be able to tell how they'll progress. Zhou Guanyu, P18. And P17, I've gone for a rookie in Nick de Vries. He showed he's great. We know he is because he won the F2 Championship, he won Formula E, and he got P9 at the Italian Grand Prix last year as a super sub, beating Latifi. Though my only reservation with that is that, well, Latifi isn't very good. So I just think that over the course of a season, I'm not sure how Nick will perform. I think he is a good driver, but also I don't know if AlphaTauri will take a big enough step forward for him to really show what he can do. And again, I think experience will tell when you're scrapping for the lower end of the points, like I see him doing. And I think as well, relative to Yuki, Yuki has to show his talent this year, and I think this year he might be able to for the first time. But yeah, I'll get to him later. Now, moving on to P16, I've gone for K-Mag. Now, reasoning behind this, again, I don't think Haas will be at the level they were at the start of last season. There's not going to be any P5 in Bahrain, I don't think. Pre-season testing could literally prove me wrong in 2 days, but we'll see. I just think that K-Mag will be very close to Hulkenberg as well. I think they're both very tight in terms of performance. I just think that K-Mag may have bigger peaks, like, you saw pole position last year in Brazil, for example, but I think Hulkenberg's probably more consistent and less prone to incident. So over the course of a season, Hulkenberg's consistency will run out, which is why I put him just above in P15. I think they're both experienced, which gives them the upper hand in terms of this little type lower end of the point pack. That's why they're sort of above the two drivers I put P17 and 18. Now, P14, I've gone for the mullet man himself, Valtteri Bottas. Now, firstly, I just want to say I love this Valtteri that we're getting in this sort of much more relaxed Alfa Romeo situation. It's so much fun to see and see that he's actually just a real funny and just genuine person. But yeah, unfortunately, I don't think he's going to get above P14. Now, this is pretty much down to the fact that I just don't think Alfa will be brilliant this year. I think he'll be able to extract the pace that there is there, and I think he'll be able to source some good points here and there when the opportunity arises, showing experience. But I just don't see him, getting higher than this. I just don't see that happening, especially with Yuki at P13 performing at a better level. I think this is his third season. He has to show that he has the ability to perform at a level that is good enough to eventually get into like a Red Bull seat. And I think if there is any season he's going to do it, it will be this one, because it's either this or nothing, I think. AlphaTauri as well will move forwards, which I think will enable him to beat this sort of pack of 3 cars, I guess, that I've put together. In 12th place, moving on to sort of the next pack of 6 drivers, I guess you could call it, with 6th to 4th, because I still think the top 3 will be the top 3. We've got Lance Stroll. Now, I think this pack of 3 will be relatively tight, but I do also think that Lance is the worst of the 6 drivers in the from P6 to 12. I think that there's no doubting he's got talent, but I just don't believe he's as strong as the other drivers around him. I can see Aston being sort of top 4 in the constructors, at least in performance towards the end of the season, maybe even at the start, you never know. But I think Lance has plenty to work on in terms of racecraft, consistency, etc. So I just think that he will remain at the back of that pack. I think he'll do well at points, but I just think overall, as a package, he's just not as clean as the others. And in P11, the next of the pack is Piastri. Now, he's a quality driver. I think he's clearly shown it in junior formulas, but he is still rookie. And moreover, I think McLaren will take a step back to an extent. Like, they won't be, last year I think McLaren only failed to get P4 because of Danny Rick underperforming. And, I'll admit to an extent it's also Alpine's reliability may have balanced that out. I think that McLaren won't have that same package that could have gotten P4. And for that reason, I have to put him here. I think McLaren will get better throughout the season. I think they will start maybe a bit more off the pace than they end. I think the early part could be quite decisive in who finishes where. And I think when Oscar's getting up to speed, I'm going to take Zhou Guanyu last year. He, at the start of the season, just wasn't performing at the level of Bottas because it was his rookie season. But towards the end, Alpha faded away, but he was closer to Bottas, so he couldn't get the points when they were available. And I do think more points will be available at the end, but I still think the early part could be decisive if it's close. P10, Pierre Gasly. I do feel a bit bad putting him here. I don't want to put him here. I really rate Gasly. When he performs, he is unbelievable, but I just think that this year, coming to a new team, it'll be a challenge. Ocon is settled, and I think that's really going to be decisive in this. I think Ocon will beat him because of how settled he is, and I also think Alpine, you never know what the reliability is going to be like. And I think I can see Gasly getting on the wrong end of it more than Ocon, like last year with Alonso. It's not just to do with the fact that I think Pierre's not going to do well. I think it's the driver in P9, Lando, that I think is going to outperform Gasly. Lando has shown consistently through the last couple of years that he is at a very, very high level. I think he, in a top car, could challenge for a world championship. I don't know if he's better or worse than, say, a Charles, but I think he has potential to challenge and be a future world champion. And I think he'll continue to show that this year. I think especially at the start where I think McLaren won't be on the pace, he will be decisive in getting those early points and just putting himself in a position where he necessarily maybe shouldn't be and then end up in P9. But the only reason he's not higher is just because I just don't think McLaren will have enough to get him higher. Also, I do think he will beat Piastri, as obviously based on the positions, but I don't think it'll be as bad as Danny Rick. I think you can see P9 and P11. There could be a lot of points between them, but I don't think there will be as many. So, in P8, not quite best of the rest, I've gone for Fernando Alonso. Now, he's still got it. We saw this last season. He's still so good. He is so good. I think Aston will be able to build on the momentum of last year, where they really improved throughout the season. I think I can see them continually improving, especially, they brought in Dan Fallows from Red Bull and they built a new factory as well. I think that'll be important as the season progresses in advance them even further. I think they will be challenging for that P4 spot, but I think the car just will be slightly short of him being able to be best of the rest. Aston as well will have some questionable strategy decisions. We've seen with Seb last year, there was a few, and sometimes Stroll got the better ones, and I think I can see that being the same again. And I think that will also hinder him from getting that P7. And speaking of P7, Esteban Ocon. Now, he's settling that team. He's comfortable. And I think Alpine will continue to produce a good car. I think they will produce a car that's better than last year's. I think they will be the fourth wheelers car overall. And I think that he will continue to show that he has a lot of talent. And I think he did beat Alonso last year, which I think is impressive no matter how lucky he got. And I think with, the Aston mistakes that I've just mentioned and also just having the better car, I think he will be able to finish best of the rest. And I think that will be the first time that he's done that. So we move on to the big boys. Firstly, before I get into the top 6, let's just start with saying that I think these guys are going to be incredibly tight this year. I think, we may see a little bit of back and forth in terms of Mercedes, for example, catching up. I think overall it'll be much tighter than last year. I really hope I'm not drinking that. But here we go. Starting at P6, we have Sergio Perez. Now, Sergio Perez is undoubtedly a talented driver, but I just don't see much change from last year. The car at the start last year was much more in favour of Sergio compared to Max. Max couldn't get comfortable, but as the season progressed, Max A got more comfortable, and the car development was very much suited the way Max drives. So I don't see that changing. I think Max will continue to beat Perez fairly convincingly, but I also think as well he will have to continue to be the sacrificial lamb and sacrifice races where Max needs it. And for that reason, I'm going to put him in P6. So in P5, I've gone for George Russell. Now, it's probably a little bit controversial to say that he's going to finish lower than he did last year. He was P4 last year. But I just think that last year he was, while fantastic, he was quite lucky. And over the course of the season, I just don't think he's as good as Lewis. I think he will have his moments. He will shine. But I think Lewis is better as a driver right now. I also think Merck will start slightly off the pace and eventually reach the front. And I think as well, last year he benefited a lot from Carlos Sainz making mistakes at the start of the season, when the car was competitive for Ferrari. So he ended up losing a lot of points as a result. Which is why I've also put Carlos Sainz in P4 this time. I think Sainz will be close with Leclerc. I just don't think he'll have enough to beat Leclerc. And I think he will just lack that little bit. Because I think while Sainz is a hard worker and he's unbelievably consistent, I think he just lacks a little bit of raw pace that you just need at the right moments to get you to that championship. And I think, unfortunately, as sad as it is to say, I just don't think he's as good as the drivers that I put in front of him. I think there's no questioning the level of the drivers in front of him. They are probably top 3 on the grid. Might be wrong, but that's just what I think. In P3, I've gone for Lewis Hamilton. Obviously, he's one of the best to ever do it, so there's no questioning his talent. I do think Merck will lack a little bit at the start and catch up towards the end, which means I don't think he'll maybe challenge overall for the title, but I think he'll have enough to beat Carlos with that in mind. Sort of in a similar vein to George last year, actually, beating Carlos because of end-of-season performance, as well as Carlos' early-season mistakes. And I think, as well, George being in last season, I know Lewis said, it is what it is, but I think that will lit a fire under him. I think he really wants that 8th. And I think if he does get the 8th, I think he's going to quit the sport because I think he's broken every record. There is just, I think, really one left that he really wants. When it's close, I think Lewis has the experience of a championship battle as well. So if he is there or thereabouts, I think that will be decisive in pushing him closer to the front than Carlos or George. Here we go, the last 2. P2, Max Verstappen, which means that in P1, I put Charles Leclerc as a new world champion. Now, this is a very much, you could say copium, Ferrari copium, but I think Ferrari will improve. I think they will improve both reliability and in their management. Because I think just today, actually, our day recording, Inaki Rueda has been replaced as head of strategy. Now, I don't know much about his replacement, Ravin Jain, but that could be a step in the right direction for Ferrari. It could end up being decisive in that they will make less mistakes. That combined with Red Bull's cost cap penalty, which will hinder them. Maybe not a lot, but it will hinder them, I think, just enough to hold them from being out in front by miles. Will mean that I think it'll be tight, but I think Charles will have the upper hand. And I also think that Charles will improve himself. I think those rough edges we saw in France last year when he crashed and, those sort of mistakes he makes, I think that he will also improve on those because I think he improves every single year. And I know Max is in ridiculous form. I don't think Max will get any worse. I think Max just will continue to perform at the level. I just think he might just fall short this time. Although he does have experience in a championship battle, which may help. Now I'm thinking about it, I could be wrong on that, but I'm sticking with it. So at the end of the season, don't judge me too hard. So I think that pretty much does it for 20th to 1st. I think, you can see my drivers from 20th to 1st here. And hopefully at the end of the season, we can look back and be like, wow, 20 out of 20. I'm so good at this. But sort of to continue on from that, constructors. Now, I've pretty much given away what my constructors will be based off the standings, but I've gone for, in 10th place, Williams. Like I said, they will remain the slowest. They'll be a close-up of the pack, but they will remain the slowest. In 9th place, I've gone for Alfa Romeo. Now, like I said, they won't have the start they did last season, and I just don't think they'll be at the level this season, perhaps next season when, the Audi deal has more impact. P8, I've gone with Haas. Now, do I think the Haas will actually be better than the Alfa Romeo? 50-50, but I think the experience of the two drivers will tell and just push them just above Alfa Romeo. And in P7, I've gone for AlphaTauri. Now, this is just because I think AlphaTauri will be better than these two. Obviously, I think Yuki will show a good level, and I think Nick as well, like I said, won't be bad, but won't be as good as Yuki. And I think just the car will be good enough just to get P7. And in 6th place, I've gone with McLaren. That's just because I think they will take a step back relative to last year. I think the other teams around them will improve more. So I think they will have to end up in P6. I think they will improve throughout the season, but I just don't think it will be enough to elevate them from this position. P5, Aston Martin. I think Stroll will let them down to an extent, but also I do think that they will improve. And I think also Alonso will be able to extract the maximum out of that car. So P5. In P4, I've gone with Alpine. I think they will be best the rest in terms of pace, and I think that will just show at the end of the season, win the standings, especially, I think it'll be tight, don't get me wrong, with Aston and McLaren, but I think at the end of the season, Alpine will be that fourth. In 3rd place, I've gone with Mercedes. Now, again, I put them P3 and P5, the drivers, so I think that gives it away, really. I think I'm going to start off the pace and then catch up, so I think that will just be enough to make them not finish P2 this time. So in P2, I've gone for Red Bull, and in P1, Ferrari. Like I said, I think it'll be tight between them throughout the season, but I just think that Ferrari might have the edge overall because I think Checo being off the pace of Max when it's this tight as I see it being, I think it will hurt them just enough to not let them have P1. I think Charles and Carlos are much more evenly matched, and if it's as tight as I think it will be this year, then I think that will be a deciding factor. Now, before we get into my wild predictions, please remember to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video and you want to see more content like this. Leave a comment on what your order is for the season, including some of your wild predictions or what you think of mine. Without further ado, here are some of my wild predictions. Now, I don't think these predictions are the wildest things in the world. These are predictions that I think might happen, but I don't know how likely they are. But I just think it'll be a bit of fun, I think Fernando Alonso will return to the F1 podium. I just think there'll be that one crazy race where Fernando just somehow ends up in a position where he's P3 and no one knows how he got there. The next one, Zhou Guanyu will out-qualify Valtteri Bottas over the course of the season. I think Zhou really closed up to Bottas at the end of last season. And I think that's the quali pace. I think he may actually just about squeak past him. Now, I've said that Bottas is going to beat Zhou in terms of points, but I think that's where experience and I think overall just racecraft and all of that comes through. And I think Bottas, while he's not the best in wheel-to-wheel, I think he will just show good pace and in the race have the measure of Zhou, even if in qualifying Zhou can beat him. On another qualifying battle, Alex Albon will beat Logan Sargent in every single qualifying they participate in on equal terms. I really like Logan Sargent. I just think Albon will want to lay down a marker and I think he's better than Logan right now because he's experienced. So it won't be a demolition. I'm not saying it'd be like a huge gap like Latifi, but it might be a 10th or 2 here or there, just especially towards the end of the season. But I think that will be a problem. I think Sargent will maybe do better in the races, but just not in qualifying. Bit of the opposite of Joe, really. Mick will have a race seat for next season. I think Mick is well liked in the paddock, and I think that there's a chance he can get a race seat. I don't think Haas will give it back to him, but maybe at Williams if Alex moves on. Or, maybe at Alfa Romeo if Joe doesn't keep the seat, or if Bottas doesn't keep the seat for whatever reason. I think there's opportunities there for Mick, and I think that he could end up doing what Alex did, really, and just having sort of an opportunity arise and just make himself so valuable to Mercedes that'd be like, you know what, he deserves a seat. I also think Andretti will be announced this year. Now, there's been a lot of resistance, and this may not be that wild, but I do think that something will be agreed with the prize pool and the entry fee, and eventually they'll be able to have the ability to join the sport. And I think it'll be great because I think there's so many good drivers in F2 right now. Like, I could list half the grid as talented drivers that could get an F1 seat, and I think the more seats, the better. So this is maybe not a wild prediction, more like a dream prediction, because I think it'd be great for the sport if they entered. And I think, that'd be also a good place for Logan Sargent to go in the future because he is American. He could be the LeBron James of F1, perhaps. And finally, I think the championship will be different if you take away sprint points. I think this has been said before in previous years, but I think this year's with, 6 sprints, I think there's a real opportunity. It remains to be seen. But if it's as tight as I think it will be, and I hope it will be, then I think that's very likely. So that's just about it for the video. Thank you very much for watching. If you guys enjoyed, then, check out my previous video looking at the reasons to be excited for the season ahead. And yeah, I'll see you next one.